Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. She was gripping the photo with trembling hands when the cellar door slammed shut behind her. Lena turned, her pulse pounding. The photo, yellowed, torn at the edge, had fallen from the attic box marked, "Old records, do not touch." She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to see this, but curiosity wasn't what drove her into this part of the house tonight. It was instinct. That sick, gnawing instinct that something wasn't right with the man she had just married. The house was freezing, though the autumn wind outside had settled. She was barefoot, still in the silk robe she'd worn after the reception. The ring on her finger felt heavier than ever, a glittering reminder that hours ago she had kissed a man 50 years her senior in front of 100 guests and lied through her smile. "Lena?" a voice called faintly. Too faint, too late. The photo. She snatched it off the floor and held it up to the single dangling bulb. There he was, her husband, Edward. But not as she knew him. Not silver-haired, frail and smiling behind gold-rimmed glasses. In the photo, he was younger. Not 73, more like 30. But it wasn't his youth that stunned her. It was the woman standing beside him. She looked exactly like Lena. Same smile, same long black hair, same curve of the chin, the same slight dip in the left shoulder. But this photo was dated. October 1974, exactly 50 years ago. The bulb flickered. She stepped back, heart racing, staring at the handwriting on the bottom of the photo. "To my darling wife, Eleanor, forever isn't long enough." Wife? No. Lena's chest caved inward. Her knees buckled, and she leaned against the wooden beam, trying to breathe. She wasn't the first. She looked like someone else, someone he had loved before. And she never knew. It wasn't love. Not real love. She'd convinced herself otherwise. When Edward first entered the bookstore where she worked part-time, he had that old-school charm, the kind that made you feel seen, like your words mattered. He asked about her favorite authors, remembered them, showed up every Friday with a flower and a soft-spoken compliment. She was alone, broke, and had just lost her mother. No family, no safety net, and Edward offered stability. He was kind, generous. He paid her student loans in a single stroke and never brought it up again. But now, everything inside her screamed. Untruth, he married her because of someone else. The cellar door creaked again. She shot up, hiding the photo behind her back. Edward's voice floated down like a calm river. "Lena, what are you doing down there, sweetheart?" She scrambled, stuffing the photo into her robe pocket, wiping her face. Her voice barely worked. "Just exploring. Couldn't sleep." She stepped out of the shadows and forced a smile. He was standing at the top of the stairs in his slippers, holding a glass of warm milk. His eyes, always gentle, studied her. "I was worried," he said. "First night as husband and wife, and you vanish." She walked up slowly. The steps creaked beneath her. "I just felt something weird," she said softly. "Like someone was watching me," Edward chuckled, but it was tight, controlled. "This house is old, my dear. Drafts and creaks, nothing more." She nodded, kissed his cheek, and took the glass from his hand. "Let's go to bed." That night, she didn't sleep. She laid beside him, staring at the ceiling, hearing every clock tick like a scream in her ear. She replayed every conversation they'd ever had, every time he'd studied her face too long, every odd pause, every moment she'd brushed off because she wanted to believe he was just lonely, not hiding something. She slipped her phone from under her pillow and typed in the name written on the photo, Eleanor Whitford. No results. She added, death, missing, obituary, still nothing. She dug deeper, typing in Edward's full, a name, Edward Ashcombe, with keywords, wife, first marriage, family. An old article popped up. From 1975, young wife of prominent banker vanishes without a trace. No evidence of foul play. She blinked. Wife, missing. The photo crinkled in her pocket. She tapped the article open. There was no photo of the wife, just the name, Eleanor Ashcombe. And Edward had been a suspect, briefly, but charges were dropped due to lack of evidence and solid alibi. The rest of the article praised his standing in the community. Her blood turned to ice. This man, her husband, had once been investigated in the disappearance of a woman who looked exactly like her, and he never told her. Morning came slowly. She acted normal, cooked him breakfast, laughed at his old war stories, let him touch her hand, but inside she was screaming. I was thinking, she said casually, pouring coffee. Maybe I'll explore town today, get to know my new home. He smiled. Of course. Anything you need, she smiled back. But the moment his back was turned, she opened her phone and snapped a photo of the attic picture, just in case. The local library was nearly empty when she arrived. She felt eyes on her, not because of who she was, but because of who she'd married. People stared at her at the grocery store too, the gas station. Whispers followed her everywhere, and now she knew why. They remembered Eleanor, and now Lena looked like her ghost. An older librarian with silver hair and thick glasses raised an eyebrow as Lena approached. "Excuse me," Lena said, "do you have archives? From the 70s? The woman tilted her head. What are you looking for?" Lena hesitated. A missing woman, Eleanor Ashcombe. Silence fell. The woman's face hardened. "Why are you asking?" Lena tried to look confused. "Just curious. My husband mentioned her name, said it was a tragic story." The woman stared at her long and hard. "You're his wife," Lena froze. "I'm sorry? You married Edward Ashcombe." She nodded slowly. The librarian leaned closer. Her voice dropped. Oh, to a whisper. "Don't trust him." Lena's skin prickled. "Why?" The librarian looked around, lowered her voice even more. She was here. Monday, shopping for a book. Happy, in love. Next day, gone. No trace. Edward said she ran off, but we knew better. Town was small. Rumors flew, but he was rich, respected. Nobody touched him. Lena swallowed. "You think he—" "I don't." "Think, dear." The woman leaned back. "I know." Then she handed Lena a slip of paper. "Visit this man. He was a reporter. He tried to expose the truth back then. Maybe he still remembers." Lena clutched the paper like a lifeline. "Thank you. Be careful. You may be sleeping next to the devil." Lena drove to the outskirts of town in Edward's sleek black car. The address led to a worn-down cottage surrounded by pine trees. It smelled of smoke and damp leaves. An old man opened the door, coughing into a handkerchief. "Yes? I'm Lena Ashcombe," she said quickly. "Edward's new wife." His eyes widened. "My God! I need to know what happened to Eleanor." He opened the door wider. "Then you better come in." Inside, dust covered everything, books, files, a faded typewriter. But on the wall, tacked like trophies, were newspaper clippings. "Banker's wife vanishes. Search ends in tragedy. Community mourns Eleanor." "She was trying to leave him," the man said quietly. "She found something about him. She was scared." "What did she find?" "I never knew. But the day before she vanished, she said she was going to the police." Lena's heart hammered. "Did she say what it was about?" "Money, papers, property not in his name, and a child." Lena blinked. A child? She thought he had. And somewhere hidden. A son, maybe, or worse. "What do you mean, worse?" He looked at her. His eyes were bloodshot. "Maybe not his child, maybe hers, from someone else." Lena's skin turned to ice. "So you think he—" "I think he killed her." The room spun. She clutched the chair beside her. "Why would he marry me?" she whispered. "If he did that to her—" The man stared. "Because you're her, Lena. You're the image of the woman who once tried to destroy him. Maybe he regrets." It, or maybe he's planning to finish what he started. Shadows of the past. Lina barely slept that night. The old man's words echoed relentlessly inside her mind. You're the image of the woman who once tried to destroy him. Maybe he's planning to finish what he started. Every second, the walls of the mansion seemed to close in on her like a suffocating cage. But Edward, how could he be capable of such darkness? The man who kissed her good morning, who whispered promises of forever, who held her fragile hands with tenderness, or was that all just a lie? The morning sun poured weakly through the grand windows, but Lina's world had grown cold and grey. She moved carefully, avoiding Edward's gaze as he hummed softly in the kitchen. He was preparing breakfast, the steam rising from the fresh coffee mug, the scent filling the silent house. The scene could have been peaceful if only her heart didn't hammer against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Lina," Edward said softly, turning to face her. His eyes held warmth, but Lina saw something else beneath. A shadow, a guarded secret. "I'm sorry about last night," she said, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I just found something. About Eleanor." Edward's face stiffened, the muscles twitching involuntarily. "Eleanor," he said, voice low. "That's ancient history." "Is it? Because I'm starting to think it's very much alive." He sighed, running a trembling hand through his white hair. "I married you because you remind me of a time I tried to forget." "What does that even mean?" Lina asked, anger and confusion mingling in her voice. Edward looked away, his fingers tightening around his cup. "You don't understand, Lina. That woman, Eleanor, was my first love, my everything. But she was fragile, too fragile for the world I lived in. She threatened everything I built." "You're saying you were afraid of her?" "Yes," he admitted quietly, "but I never meant for things to end the way they did." Lina's heart skipped. "You never meant to hurt her?" Edward swallowed hard, then looked at her with eyes filled with pain. "I loved her. But love sometimes breaks people." The house felt heavier after that conversation, like secrets lurked behind, every corner watching, waiting. Lina's trust in Edward was cracking, crumbling like the peeling wallpaper in the dusty cellar. Determined to find the truth, she decided to visit the local police station. Maybe there were files, old reports, evidence that would explain what really happened to Eleanor. If Edward wasn't telling her everything, she would uncover it herself. At the station, the clerk was reluctant to help. The case was decades old, cold, and not much was left. But after persistent pleading, Lina was handed a thin, yellowed folder labeled Ashcombe, Eleanor Whitford. The report was chilling. Police report. Case 1974-2389. Victim, Eleanor Whitford, Ashcombe. Date, missing October 22nd, 1974. Last seen, leaving Edward. Ashcombe's estate. Late evening, case status closed. Ruled as voluntary disappearance due to lack of evidence. Reading through the report, Lina felt her stomach twist. Statements from neighbors described heated arguments between Edward and Eleanor in the weeks before her disappearance. A mysterious stranger was reported lurking near the estate. Eleanor's close friend had confided that Eleanor was scared of someone, without naming names. And then a note. A single, crumpled note found near the estate's garden shed. "If anything happens to me, look for the truth beneath the stones." The phrase haunted Lina. What stones? What truth? She remembered the attic box, the hidden photo, and Edward's cryptic warning. She needed answers. But the answers might come with dangers she wasn't ready for. Later that day, back at the mansion, Lina confronted Edward. "Did you ever find that note?" she asked, watching him closely. Edward's eyes darkened, a flicker of something unspoken passing through. "No," he said carefully. "That woman was reckless. She left no clues. Nothing but silence. Then maybe it's time someone broke the silence, Lena whispered, voice steady despite the fear rising inside. Her first stop was the garden she'd mentioned in the note. It stood behind the mansion, forgotten and overgrown. She pushed open the rusty door, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust and rot. She searched among broken tools, old flower pots, and cracked stone tiles. Then her fingers brushed something cold and metallic beneath a pile of moss-covered stones. Her heart raced. She pulled out a small, rusted tin box. Inside, carefully folded, papers lay wrapped in oilskin. She unfolded the oldest document first, a faded letter addressed to Eleanor. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "if you read this, then I have failed to protect you. You must know the truth before it's too late." The letter was unsigned, but the handwriting was elegant, deliberate. As Lena read, her breath caught. Eleanor had discovered something about Edward's past, a secret involving a second family hidden away in a distant city. A son, not Edward's biological child, but one he raised as his own, a child born from lies and betrayal. Lena folded the letter, her mind spinning. Was Edward hiding a son? Did Eleanor's disappearance have something to do with this secret? A family? She felt like a pawn in a twisted game, and the board was filled with shadows and ghosts. That night, Lena stayed awake, restless. The house whispered around her, creaking floorboards, distant ticking clocks, and her own heartbeat pounding. In her ears, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging. Some truths are better left buried." Fear clenched her chest, but determination flared brighter. If Edward's past was a minefield, Lena was already standing on the fuse. She wouldn't let history repeat itself. The son who shouldn't exist. Lena's hands trembled as she stared at the text on her phone screen. "Stop digging. Some truths are better left buried." The words felt like a warning, maybe even a threat, but the fire inside her was growing. She wasn't going to back down now, not when she was so close. Her mind replayed Edward's confession from the letter. Eleanor left behind, a hidden son, a second family, a lifetime of secrets lurking beneath the polished surface of the mansion. Who was this son? And why had Edward buried the truth so deeply? Early the next morning, Lena decided to confront Edward again, but this time with evidence. She carried the faded letter and the tin box tightly in her hands as she entered the grand dining room where Edward was reading the newspaper. Edward looked up, a tired smile touching his lips. "Good morning, Lena." "Good morning," she replied, voice firm but calm. "We need to talk." Edward's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "I found this." She placed the letter on the table and slid the tin box across. Edward's fingers hovered over the letter but didn't touch it. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "Why? What are you afraid of?" Lena asked. "You owe me the truth." Edward sighed heavily, running his hand through his silver hair. "The son. His name is Michael." Lena's heart skipped. "Michael?" Edward nodded. "He was born before I married Eleanor. I raised him as my own, but he wasn't really mine. Why didn't you tell me?" Lena's voice cracked with emotion. Edward looked away, pain flashing in his eyes. "Because Michael was a secret no one was supposed to know. He was the product of a betrayal, my own brother's betrayal." Lena blinked, stunned. "Your brother?" "Yes. My younger brother, Thomas. He had an affair with a woman in another city, and Michael was the result." Edward's voice was barely a whisper. "I promised Eleanor I would protect that secret, but Michael, he disappeared years ago." "Disappeared? What do you mean?" Lena asked, gripping the edge of the table. Edward's jaw clenched. "He ran away when he was 16, left a note saying he couldn't live with the lies anymore. After that, no one heard from him." Lena swallowed the surge of questions flooding her mind. Why hadn't Edward tried harder to find Michael? Why was he so secretive about this? Do you think Michael could be connected to Eleanor's disappearance? Lena whispered. Edward hesitated. I don't know. But Eleanor was terrified. She thought someone was trying to erase the past. Determined to find answers, Lena decided to track down Michael herself. She spent hours online, searching public records, social media, anything that could lead her to the missing son. Days passed and frustration mounted. Michael seemed to have vanished into thin air. Then one evening she received another anonymous message. Stop looking, or you'll end up like Eleanor. The threat only strengthened Lena's resolve. She reached out to a private investigator, Thomas Kane, recommended by a trusted friend. Thomas was a gruff man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I don't care about the money, Lena told him. I just want to know what happened to Michael and Eleanor. Thomas nodded. You're stepping into dangerous territory. Secrets like these don't stay hidden without a fight. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas dug deep. He uncovered police reports, old letters and witness statements that painted a tangled web of betrayal, lies and greed. Michael had left a trail of small jobs, changing cities frequently, trying to stay under the radar. But Thomas found one clue, a hospital record from 3 years ago in a city hundreds of miles away. Michael had been admitted after a serious accident. The hospital had no record of family visitors, and Michael gave a fake name. The pieces were falling into place. Michael was alive, but hiding. Why? What was he running from? Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Lena's relationship with Edward grew colder. The man she had married felt like a stranger, a ghost from a painful past. One night she overheard Edward on the phone, his voice low and urgent. You don't threaten me or my family. If she finds out, everything falls apart. Lena's heart pounded. Who was he talking to, and what was the secret he was so desperate to protect? That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She crept out of the room and followed Edward as he drove to a small, run-down part of town. Edward met a shadowy figure in an alleyway. The conversation was tense, words sharp and threatening. I warned you, Edward hissed. Keep her quiet, or I'll make sure she regrets it. The man nodded, a sinister smile on his face. Lena's blood ran cold. This was bigger than she imagined. Danger was closing in from all sides. Back home, Lena confronted Edward the next morning. Who was that man? She demanded. Edward's face hardened. Someone from my past, someone who owes me. Why are you so afraid of me finding the truth? Edward looked at her, eyes dark and unreadable. Because the truth will destroy us both. Lena realized she was caught in a deadly game, a battle between past sins and present survival. But she refused to back down. The secrets Edward buried would come to light, no matter the cost. The hidden truth. Lena woke with a start. The remnants of the nightmare clung to her like a heavy fog. She could still hear the menacing voices from the alley, Edward's threats hanging in the air like poison. The mansion, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. But there was no turning back. Determined to push deeper, Lena returned to the faded letter Eleanor had left. There was a line she hadn't understood before, one that now struck her with chilling clarity. If anything happens to me, look for the truth beneath the stones. She was convinced Eleanor wanted her to find something hidden in the mansion, something that would expose the dark secret Edward was desperate to keep. Lena began with the garden shed again, retracing every step. She searched beneath every stone, every cracked tile. Then, just as dusk painted the sky with amber, her fingers scraped something cold and metallic. It was a small key, old and rusted but still intact. That night, she showed Edward the key. What does this open? She demanded. Edward's face paled. I don't know, he whispered. But you should leave it alone. But Lena's resolve had hardened into steel. I'm not leaving until I know the truth. Using the key, Lena explored the mansion's Enzella, a labyrinth of dusty tunnels and forgotten rooms. In a hidden alcove, she found a heavy iron door, locked tight. Her heart raced as she slid the key into the lock. It turned with a groan. Inside, she discovered a room filled with old trunks, faded photographs, and dusty journals. She opened the nearest trunk, pulling out a leather-bound diary. The diary belonged to Eleanor. Her handwriting was delicate but desperate, revealing a woman trapped between love and fear. Page after page detailed Eleanor's growing suspicion that Edward's past was darker than anyone imagined. She wrote of secret meetings, strange phone calls, and a man who stalked her from the shadows. Most hauntingly, she confessed her fear for Michael, the son Edward never acknowledged publicly. One entry stopped Lena cold. Edward promised to protect us, but I fear he is part of the darkness closing in. Michael is not safe. If anything happens to me, I beg you, find Michael and keep him safe. Lena's mind raced. Why would Edward hide this from her? And who was the mysterious man threatening? Him. The next day, Lena confronted Edward with the diary. He didn't deny it. Instead, he collapsed into a chair, exhaustion and regret washing over his face. I was trying to protect you, Lena. Protect all of us. But from what? She asked. Edward's eyes flickered with pain. There is a family feud, one that goes back generations. He told her of a bitter rivalry with his brother Thomas and a dangerous secret buried deep in their family history. Michael, Edward said, had been caught in the middle. Suddenly the phone rang, a piercing sound in the quiet mansion. Edward answered. His face turned pale. It's him, he whispered. He's coming. Lena realized the danger was closer than ever. But she wasn't. Afraid. She was ready. Shadows of the past, the phone call had rattled Edward deeply. Lena watched as the usually composed man struggled to steady his voice. He's coming, Edward repeated, eyes darting toward the window, as if expecting someone to appear through the dense fog that had settled outside. Lena's pulse quickened. The danger she had been running from was no longer a shadow lurking in the background. It was right on their doorstep. The next few hours passed in a tense blur. Edward paced the grand living room, occasionally stopping to glance out the window. Lena tried to process everything she'd learned, the hidden son, the family feud, the mysterious threats. It all felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. But beneath her fear was a burning determination. She couldn't let history repeat itself. She wouldn't be a victim. At dusk, the sound of engines echoed through the estate's long driveway. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Edward's face was grim as he opened the heavy front door. A black SUV rolled to a stop, and two men stepped out, tall, imposing figures dressed in dark coats. They moved with practiced confidence, eyes scanning the mansion as if assessing a battlefield. One of them approached Edward. "We need to talk," the man said simply. Inside, tension crackled like electricity. Edward introduced the men as Lucas and Frank, former associates of Thomas, his estranged brother. Lena's mind reeled. If these men were connected to Thomas, what did that mean for Michael and for Eleanor's disappearance? Lucas spoke first. His voice was cold, measured. Michael is alive, but he's in danger. The feud between the brothers is far from over. Frank added, "We're here to protect you both. But the past doesn't let go easily." Edward's eyes darkened. Michael has been hiding for years, but now someone is hunting him. Lena felt a chill. The quiet life she had imagined was shattered. "We need to find Michael," she said, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. Edward nodded slowly. "There's one place he might have gone. A small town where no one would think to look." The next morning, Lena and Edward, accompanied by Lucas and Frank, set out on the journey to find Michael. The road stretched endlessly before them, winding through forests and forgotten highways. Along the way, Edward revealed fragments of the past, bitter betrayals, family secrets, and the dark choices that had shaped his life. Lena listened, absorbing every word. The man she thought she knew was a stranger, haunted by ghosts she was only beginning to understand. After hours of driving, they reached a quiet town nestled between rolling hills. They checked into a small inn, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken fears. Lena's thoughts raced. What would Michael be like? Angry? Hurt? Would he want to see them? That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She wandered the town's empty streets, searching for answers in the silence. She found herself outside a modest house with peeling paint and a dim light flickering inside. Her heart pounded as she knocked on the door. A young man answered, tall, with haunted eyes and a wary expression. "Michael?" Lena asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. "I've been waiting for someone to find me," he said. Inside, Michael shared his story, a life marked by pain, rejection, and a desperate need for belonging. He revealed the truth about Thomas, the dangers he had faced, and the reason he had run away. Lena felt a surge of empathy and resolve. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage anymore. She was fighting for a family torn apart by lies. But as dawn broke, a shadow loomed over their reunion. A message on Lena's phone read, "Leave now, or the past will destroy you all." Fear and hope collided. The battle was far from over, but together they would face whatever came next. The web tightens. The warning on Lena's phone felt like a punch to the gut. "Leave now, or the past will destroy you all." She stared at the message in disbelief, her fingers trembling. Michael, sitting beside her, clenched his jaw. "Who could have sent this?" Lena asked, voice barely above a whisper. Michael's eyes darkened. "It has to be Thomas. He doesn't want us to be reunited." Edward, who had been pacing in the small living room of the inn, stopped and looked at them. "We can't run forever," he said, voice steady but filled with quiet pain. "It's time to confront this once and for all." The four of them, Lena, Edward, Michael, and Lucas, gathered around the battered kitchen table. Lucas spread out a map. "We know Thomas has allies. He's ruthless and has no qualms about using violence to get what he wants." Frank, who had been silent so far, nodded grimly. "We have limited time. If Thomas wants to hurt Michael, he'll act soon." Lena felt the weight of the moment press down on her. The fragile threads holding their fragile new family together trembled with uncertainty. But beneath the fear, a fierce determination burned. They would not be victims. They would fight. That night, as Lena lay awake, her mind replayed everything: Eleanor's desperate words, Edward's confessions, Michael's pain. She realized that what they faced wasn't just a family feud. It was a battle for survival, for truth, for justice, and she was no longer willing to be silent. The following day, they moved cautiously through the town, avoiding prying eyes. Lena noticed how Michael flinched at every glance, every whisper. His scars ran deep. She reached out and took his hand. "We'll get through this," she promised. But just as hope began to bloom, tragedy struck. That afternoon, Edward was ambushed on the road. Lucas and Frank found him barely conscious, bloodied and shaken. At the hospital, Lena's heart shattered as she sat beside Edward's bed. He squeezed her hand weakly. "They won't stop," he whispered. "Thomas. He's more dangerous than I ever imagined." Tears blurred Lena's vision, but she wiped them away. "We'll stop him. For you, for Michael, for Eleanor." The attack changed everything. The quiet town no longer felt safe. They had to act, and fast. Lena took charge, coordinating with Lucas and Frank to gather evidence of Thomas's crimes. They uncovered a web of corruption, lies, and betrayal that stretched far beyond the family. The truth was more terrifying than any of them had guessed. Then came a breakthrough. Secret ledger hidden in Thomas's own office detailed illegal deals and a plan to seize control of the family estate and silence anyone who stood in his way. Armed with the ledger and the diary Eleanor had left, Lena confronted Edward. "This is the proof we need," she said, voice fierce. "We can expose him." Edward nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. Justice for Eleanor. But Thomas was watching, and he had one final devastating move. Late that night, Lena's phone buzzed again, a video message. Thomas appeared on screen, cold and mocking. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming." Fear clashed with resolve. Lena knew the battle was far from over, but she also knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer afraid. Truth and redemption. Lena sat in the dim light of the motel room, the flickering screen of her phone illuminating her determined face. Thomas's last message echoed in her mind. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming." Her heart pounded, but her resolve was unshaken. This was the moment to end the nightmare, for Eleanor, for Michael, and for herself. Edward's recovery was slow but steady. Despite the pain etched on his weathered face, a fierce light burned in his eyes. "We have to move forward," he said one evening, gripping Lena's hand. "No more hiding." Together with Michael, Lucas, and Frank, they hatched a plan to expose Thomas once and for all. They would present the evidence to the authorities and the media, making sure the truth could no longer be buried beneath the weight of fear and lies. But first, Lena wanted one last thing: closure. She returned to the mansion, now empty and silent. Every room held a memory, every corner whispered secrets. She stood before the fireplace where Eleanor's portrait once hung. Taking a deep breath, Lena spoke aloud. "You didn't deserve any of this, Eleanor, but your truth will set us free." The following day, armed with Eleanor's diary and Thomas's ledger, they met with the local police and a trusted investigative journalist. The evidence was overwhelming. The story unfolded like a dark thriller. A bitter family feud, threats, illegal dealings, and a woman silenced to protect a legacy of greed. The community was shaken. The mansion, once a symbol of power, became a reminder of courage and truth. As Thomas's arrest made headlines, Lena watched Michael breathe a sigh of relief. For the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders lifted, but the battle had taken its toll. Lena felt the scars beneath her skin, the betrayal, the fear, the heartbreak. Yet, in the darkest moments, she discovered a strength she never knew she had. In a quiet moment, Lena sat beside Edward. "I never thought I'd find love like this," she whispered. Edward smiled, eyes misty. "Love isn't about age. It's about truth, trust, and fighting for what matters." Months later, the mansion was no longer a prison, but a home. Lena and Edward worked to restore it, not just the walls, but the legacy, one built on honesty and hope. Michael, now healing, found peace in knowing the truth. One evening, Lena stood on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors of new beginnings. She thought of Eleanor, the brave woman who had fought in silence. And she knew the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are. The secret that had broken Lena almost destroyed her, but from the ashes she rose stronger, a survivor, a fighter, a woman who reclaimed her story. The end.